Welcome to the CHCI Leadership Conference Breakout Session, Cryptocurrency and the Global Market. We are grateful to our sponsors, Blockchain Association, Stellar Development Foundation, and Visa. Our panel chair for today's session is Representative Darren Soto, representing Florida's 9th Congressional District. He serves on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce and the House Committee on Natural Resources. We also welcome Kai Sheffield, Head of Crypto Products at Visa, who will provide welcoming remarks. Our moderator for today's session is Jonathan Pontiano. He's a senior reporter at Forbes, focusing on markets and finance. Please welcome our opening speaker, Representative Darren Soto.
Hello, I'm Congressman Darren Soto, and I'm honored to be able to address CHCI and so many of our friends here today on the important topic of cryptocurrency and the global market. First, thank you to CHCI for what you do to help Latino and Latina interns have opportunities both on the Hill and throughout Washington. You're creating the next generation of leaders, and thank you to all those supporting this effort. We have a familiarity, many of us, with cryptocurrency at this point. It's based upon blockchain technology, which is essentially a fixed ledger. Once you add transactions to that ledger, you can never erase them. You can never change them. And so that makes transactions on the internet much more trustworthy and authentic and keeps integrity within these transactions, which is absolutely critical. And we see a rise in the use of cryptocurrency, a type of blockchain technology, over the last few years, both in Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and so many others that have been used in both transactions, even in investments. And even as this rise in use and value has occurred, and 60% of the total American market is familiar with cryptocurrency, many of our fellow Hispanics still aren't familiar with this investment and technology tool. On the Energy and Commerce Committee, I'm honored to be able to work on many of these issues, and also as chair of the Blockchain Caucus here in Congress. I'm the lead sponsor, and my staff and I are working on key issues on several bills in this area to protect consumers, to boost American competitiveness, to provide tax clarification and advice, and to make sure to deal with some of the biggest issues we face right now. Many of you may have been surprised to see cryptocurrency be one of the big issues in the recent bipartisan infrastructure debate in the Senate. The battle was over who are custodians of cryptocurrency transaction records for purposes of reporting. And I just filed 2 bills to help assist with that clarification in the House. So it is your fellow Congressional Hispanic Caucus members leading the way in cryptocurrency. All the more reason our community should be leading the way on the challenges. We know there are opportunities. Small businesses, particularly providing services, can through cryptocurrency do transactions across the world without exchanging currencies. Remittances to foreign countries that many of our families still live in are vastly cheaper through cryptocurrency. We can even have folks in Central and South America facing unstable governments and hyperinflation hedge against that uncertainty by doing transactions in cryptocurrency. And of course, it'll increase access to capital for small businesses. We know the challenges: education, educating small businesses on these opportunities, educating the public on both using it and investing in it, particularly in international transactions, where we could use it so much to help out with transactions between the United States and our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, Central, and South America. We know another challenge: protect consumers against fraud. There are a lot of scams out there, and there's even times when the market gets pumped up and falls down and people lose money. I encourage folks to use this as a currency tool and then seek investment advice if you're planning on investing using cryptocurrency as an investment. And of course, we have challenges with access to the internet, high-powered computers that can work these different technologies, all challenges that we need to help the Hispanic community in this 21st century financial technology and financial market access. I encourage you all to consider these and other opportunities and challenges during your discussion today, and thank you again, CHCI, for having me.
Hello everyone, I'm Kai Sheffield, Head of Crypto at Visa. I'm excited to introduce this breakout session on crypto and the global market, especially its potential impact to empower Latino communities, investors, and future builders. At Visa, we believe economic empowerment is about removing the structural and systemic biases that degrade trust and entrench inequality. Combined with the fact that this year has brought unprecedented news and developments around crypto, the digital acceleration brought about by COVID has laid bare existing inequities, especially social and financial. It's an important time to have this conversation. What's uniquely powerful about crypto is that it simultaneously exists as a technology, an industry, and a new asset class. Crypto has an opportunity to help become a gateway to financial literacy. Everyone needs money to be able to live and thrive, but few people get the opportunity to take a step back and understand what money is, how it has changed over time, and how it's evolving into the future with new technologies. Visa has been working closely with industry leaders like Stellar, Circle, Tala, and the Blockchain Association to help ensure that these new innovations are brought to market in a way that can solve real problems and help improve access to better payments and remittances for underserved communities. For Visa, it's a business imperative to support the fight for racial equality. And as we think about how to address longstanding racial wealth disparities and promote economic empowerment, it's important to consider ways that crypto can play a role. Hope you enjoy the next session.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Pontiano. I'm a senior reporter at Forbes, focusing on markets and finance, and I'm excited to be here today. Thank you, Congressman Soto and Kai, for the opening remarks and setting the tone for our conversation today. And thank you to CHCI for hosting this thoughtful leadership conference and focusing attention on the contributions of immigrants and discussing how smarter policies and inclusive practices can advance our immigrant workforce. So over the past year, we've seen the price of Bitcoin rise more than 500%, a slew of cryptocurrencies going viral on social media, and the value of the world's cryptocurrencies in total growing to more than $2 trillion. Now more than ever, these relatively new instruments are being touted as potentially critical to our digital future. So I'm very excited to start discussing the challenges and opportunities facing the industry, particularly as it pertains to minority investors. But before we move on to our panel, we do want this to be an interactive discussion. And we invite you all to be a part of it by submitting your questions in the chat function here, or by sharing your thoughts on social media using the hashtag CHCIHHM21. And with that, I'm so happy to be joined by three blockchain and cryptocurrency experts who will introduce themselves too. First, we have Navrup Sadev, the founder and CEO of The Digital Economist. Hi,
Thank
Navrup.
you so much, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here at CHCI. Good to be back, and Jonathan, with yourself as well. And my name is Navrup Sadev. I'm the founder CEO of The Digital Economist, which is a global impact platform focused on building the missing knowledge pieces for the digital economy. So we actually focus heavily on the decentralized space, more broadly, over and beyond blockchain as well. And Jonathan, to your point, the comments we heard from Kai and Representative Soto are so spot on as to what really is the value and not just the innovation of this technology, the interest and the potential adoption we're seeing with the institutional interest, and so on and so forth. And I think it's really something that's core to our mission at the Digital Economist as well, working at the intersectionality of economic science, which again is to serve and improve human lives, business strategy, as well as emerging tech. So I'll hand over back to you, Jonathan, with a little brief intro, and can't wait to get into the session.
Thank you, Navrup. And next up, we have Kristen Smith, the Executive Director of Blockchain Association.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. My name is Kristen Smith, and as Jonathan said, I am the Executive Director of the Blockchain Association, which is a trade association for the crypto industry. I think that Kai Sheffield in his opening remarks said something important. Crypto means a lot of different things. There isn't broader ecosystem and a community that is involved. There's the crypto industry. There are crypto networks, which are these protocols upon which we are building all of these amazing services. And, there's also the cryptocurrencies, which are sort of the more popular way that people first enter into this world. So it's a really exciting space. I think there is so much that these crypto networks can do for building out a better financial services system, one that today has actually left many people out of it who want to be into it. And I think that crypto has solutions there. Crypto is also the foundation for a better internet, one that is stronger and safer. And so many wonderful things, but excited to be here with this panel today. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Kristen. And finally, we have Danelle Dixon, who is the CEO and Executive Director of Stellar Development Foundation. Hello, Danelle.
Hello, thanks so much. I'm so honored to be here. And all of you guys have already said so many of the important things. Representative Soto talking about the inclusivity and the need for that. One of the things that we do at the Stellar Development Foundation is we're focused on the shepherding the code base for the Stellar Network, which is an open, decentralized network. But why is that important? It's important because what happens with respect to this kind of financial technology that's out there is it provides the ability for folks to have access all over the world to the tools and the financial tools that others have access to. It's just a matter of fact. Importantly, the existing financial system is built for the few and not the many. And what you can do with blockchain technology and what you can do with the use of cryptocurrencies and stablecoins is make it so that the global financial system is built for the many, so that the many have access to all of these tools that are out there. And even the simple things, just being able to hold your assets in a wallet and not under your bed, these are important things. So part of our job is to make sure that not just regulators and peers understand this, but that all folks out there have access to the tools and information about how to use them. So I'm so happy to be here with this panel and with you, Jonathan. So let's get started.
So thank you again, everyone. And with that, I think to my question. So first one, Navrup, despite the market's atmospheric rise over the past decade, a recent survey, and as Congressman Soto pointed out, showed only about half of Latinos and African Americans actually have even heard of cryptocurrencies. Why do you think that is? Navrup, I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me now, Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. So I was just saying I will respond to that in two parts. The first is the assumption in the question, and the second is I think what you're getting to with that question, right? And that data point. I think there's that intrinsic, for those of us who have been in the space for 5-10 years, which is fairly long in this space. The assumption that blockchain or distributed ledger technologies or that the entire ecosystem would benefit everyone. And I think I just want to put that out there that that's an assumption that remains to be tested from a more adoption perspective, right? The value of the technology itself, even though I am in fact one of those who are optimistic about it and I've done a bunch of work from a more economic value creation perspective and everything that it unleashes. The second thing, what I think, Jonathan, you are getting to with that question is around the innovation and the benefits of innovation at large in general, right? And the adoption with segments of the demographic that usually are the laggards. I think that's sort of what you're referring to, where perhaps a lot of the underrepresented communities, still using, Western Union, for example. You walk into a local bodega shop and you see oh my God, who's using this these days, right? And I think that's problematic, where the efficiency gains, where the search and transaction costs that new technologies help to reduce massively have not been availed by parts of the population. right now. Of course, there is hope, which is because with internet technologies, the adoption curve is much steeper. It's much faster. We go through that S curve much faster these days. Right. So I think, again, whom you interact with, whom you hang out with makes a lot of difference. And of course, becoming mainstream takes time as well. And again, I think the critical aspect of these support groups, the communities we are part of, what's being talked about there is just so critical, right? So, for example, having access to MIT, Connection Science, for example, where I'm a fellow, it's a whole different set of conversations from, the folks I hang out here with in Hawaii with my, hula group. So, there's that, right? And just to kind of, finish up that response, I just think when it comes to adoption of innovation, of technology, the education aspect that Kai referred to, that Representative Soto referred to, is just so critical. And I think platforms like this, CHCI is, again, doing amazing stuff and bringing that learning and knowledge here. And we have to think about how we can inspire and bring people into the fold from the ground up, and then, top down when it comes to innovating in the next wave of technological innovations that would serve us. So I'll pause with that. I'm sure Danelle and Kristen have a lot to say on it as well. And back to you, Jonathan.
I'll just jump in because I think we might have lost Jonathan for a second. Oh, here, is he back?
Now?
Okay. I was just going to say that I'm not sure that the disparity in awareness can be attributed just to the knowledge gap. I think that, the worlds of finance and tech have essentially excluded people of color and women broadly for a long time. Maybe not intentionally, but certainly it's dependent upon within your organization. And when an industry isn't representative of the greater population, then it's going to be reflective of who they're reaching out to. So that's really one of the important things here. I also just want to add one thing, is that I'm not convinced that everyone needs to be aware necessarily of cryptocurrency or even the term blockchain, so much as they need to be able to feel comfortable using the wallets or using the application layers that are available to them to be able to get access to these tools. Importantly, you and I may understand that HTTPS is something that we leverage every day when we use the internet, but not everyone needs to be aware of that. They just need to be comfortable using the internet. And so I look at blockchain technology and even the use of some of the cryptocurrencies and under the stable coins and all the other pieces that we can bring into it, as if the UX is really good, if the experience is really good for the end user, anyone should be able to access it and use it without any unique knowledge or technological advantage.
Thank you, Danelle. And with this month, we saw a huge step in adoption with the news of El Salvador becoming the first country in the world to make Bitcoin legal tender. I think with that, and we've touched on them, there come a lot of opportunities and challenges. Kristen, could you talk us through what those could possibly be?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in June, it was announced, strangely, at the conference in Miami that El Salvador was moving to pass legislation to make Bitcoin legal tender. And indeed, that legislation was enacted into law, and it's the first country around the world to have done so. It's interesting because the development was actually sort of a bit of received mixed reaction in the cryptocurrency community. On one hand, wow, Bitcoin, this digital currency that was created, only 12 years ago, is now something that a sovereign nation is looking to function as legal tender. I mean, that's amazing news. But there was also some controversy around it, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays going forward. So the controversy was that the way El Salvador implemented this is it really put a big burden on the businesses by requiring this, right? I think that people in the cryptocurrency community are very big on having choice, on having competition, on having sort of local solutions tailored to local needs. And, this was a little bit of a, kind of pushing this down people's throats. And, even polling today, kind of going back to the earlier question, there's still well over half of the country, or half of the people in El Salvador that aren't familiar with Bitcoin and what it is. But a lot of businesses are adapting technology and starting to do it. And actually, a lot of people in El Salvador received a little bit of Bitcoin to start learning, but there is a little bit of a learning curve there. I think one downside in challenge that's going to have to be addressed is there is a lot of price volatility in Bitcoin. Over time, it's turned out to be a tremendous store of value and a tremendous investment, but you really have to hold on to it for a while to see that. There are other types of innovations in the crypto space that are really aimed at addressing payments, right? So for everyday commerce, if you want to buy your groceries or participate in the economy, it does seem to be better to have a sort of more stable type value that you can exchange. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see this play out. I mean, certainly major news and in many ways a very large step forward, but it is a little bit of diving into the deep end. There's a lot of risks and challenges with owning cryptocurrency, but a fascinating experiment, and one that I think historians, the crypto community, economists, and others are going to be watching very, very closely in the months and years ahead.
Very fascinating. I agree. And I think one of the things that I found most fascinating about this is the impact that this can have for remittances, which I think I saw something about El Salvador, 25% of its GDP being composed of remittances, so from migrants sending money back. Danelle, can you talk us through, what the impact can be to families in El Salvador who might be receiving money in Bitcoin now?
Well, yeah, I think that it's really interesting if you think about that this was the motivating factor for the law, is because of the remittance market, because of how reliant they were on remittances, and frankly, because of how fragmented and broken that system is in terms of getting remittances into the country in a way that's not slow, that's cost effective, and that actually really benefits those are the receivers and the end users versus actually the rest of the remittance market. So I think that it highlighted those challenges with respect to that. It draws attention to the notion, and to piggyback a little bit on what Kristen said in terms of Bitcoin being so volatile. I think it's still a really great and interesting use case, and to see how they're going to leverage it in El Salvador. I think it was done really quickly. I think it was done without a lot of education. And so I think even with respect to the remittance piece, it can be a challenge. It could be highly costly depending on how what the fees are on the network, depending on how the network is working at the time. But it also could work seamlessly at some point if you continue to work on the issues like with the Lightning Network and other things like that. So I think big picture, this is actually highlighting a use case that we need to focus on in blockchain generally. I love the remittance use case because it is the one that impacts local communities more so than other use cases. So I love that part of it. Our hope is that it enables this consumer-centric approach towards safe pathways for expanding the use of digital currencies across Latin America, in El Salvador and elsewhere. There are other products out there like stable coins that make it so that you don't have that volatility challenge that you have with Bitcoin. But again, I think that, assuming we can get the education done right, because I do think with Bitcoin, there's a little bit more of an education need there because of the volatility. I'm really excited about this because what I hope is that we're going to actually get to the place where networks like Stellar are going to be something that's very useful for those economies. Our network is very focused on asset issuance and remittances and payments. And it's the fees in comparison to the fees of the current market, it's 100,000 transactions for less than a penny, whereas the current market is much higher in terms of how to send money into these geographies. So I think that this is a great step forward. I think that, we just need to kind of watch it and support it as much as we can as they start to get used to this whole idea. One other thing I'll just say is I do think that when we're still looking at the world through the eyes of whatever the local currency is or through the eyes of dollars, I think having like the fraction of a Bitcoin and using that to pay for something is kind of hard to get all those zeros in there as you're getting just like you're trying to buy something from a store or something like that. So there are challenges unless everything's priced in Bitcoin instead of the local currency.
So you mentioned that it happened so quickly, and it did. And I think the education component there will be so important. So taking a step back here, Navrup, a lot of the value underpinning cryptocurrencies is thanks to the blockchain technology that's powering them. Can you explain what that is to us and just the value and challenges that blockchain itself could bring to the Latino community?
Sure, yeah, and agree wholeheartedly with a lot of very valuable comments that Danelle and Christian just made on this use case in particular. But I think generally too for the Latin American continent. To your question, Jonathan, on the value of the technology itself. So I've actually been giving a talk on this, how value is created in tokenized economies. But actually, we took a step back from a behavioral economics perspective. What we uncovered is that all value at the end of the day is perceived value, right? A glass of water right now may not have a lot of value to you, but if you're in a desert and you're dying, that means everything, right? And so at the end of the day, we ascribe value to things. The other comment I want to make here is the value of money, right? Money in general, money is a human creation. And for a lot of people, it's kind of hard to wrap their heads around the fact that money intrinsically doesn't have any value. Again, we ascribe value to it. And so a lot of people think that it has intrinsic value. And it's interesting because, I'm born and raised in India. And when you don't have a lot of capital, that is almost the default mode to kind of wrap your head around with the sort of, training, whether it's coming from economics or just working in frontier tech that goes in there. And anyone who has arrived at that point, it's a bit of a journey, right? So that I would sort of mark as one of the takeaways from this session, that intrinsically there's no value in money and we ascribe value to things. So when it comes to blockchain, again, one more time, it's going to come down to, Alex Spindler and MIT talks about this. If enough number of, interesting and accomplished and that's probably the wrong word, but smart people are looking at a certain technology, you can almost be sure that it's going to go somewhere because the heads and the hands are working on building it. So I'm very optimistic and I'm very bullish on the fact that with the sort of interest we're seeing from an institutional perspective, that value of the tech itself would be very quickly established and is going on as we speak. And just to kind of final thought there, it could be used for anything that we ascribe it to be. Again, I agree with Danelle's comments here, where she talks about, it doesn't has to be something that people need to understand as long as they're useful and comfortable working with it. And of course, internet is sort of the prime example of that. The same can go for blockchain, but I do think there is an opportunity to bring people into the conversation, right? And that's really, I think, all of us here on this panel are doing on an everyday basis to build better, to build the second wave of infrastructure technology in a way that's inclusive. And it's, again, innovation coming from the ground up. And that is why the education component and understanding the problems on ground are so important. So I'll pause here and give it back to you, Jonathan.
Well, I mean, I think you're kind of segueing us there perfectly. When we talk about building on the technology and the discussions and conversations that need to happen here in order to make sure you're doing that, with inclusivity, like at the forefront. As we move toward a digitized world, what could be at stake if we don't engage with the policy here? And what should be a part of those discussions with constituents? Kristen?
Well, there is a lot at stake because what is happening right now is the community that is building these networks and building on top of these networks, they're really trying to fix flawed systems, whether it be our flawed banking system or our flawed sort of platform-focused internet system. It's really trying to build these up in a bigger, better way. Regulators, as they look at this space, they're trying to figure out how to apply existing regulation to these new networks. And while we certainly want to see achievement of the same goals that policy goals that we have with traditional regulation today for traditional networks or financial services, the problem is that these networks operate very differently. So you have to have a different type of regulation in order to achieve kind of the same goals that we have in regulation today. And so the problem is that one of the main reasons that people don't have access to our traditional banking system today is that the requirements around identity and documents and are very problematic for a certain part of a certain percentage of the U.S. Sort of consumer base. And so, if we end up putting those same regulations on crypto networks, we're going to end up with that same result of keeping people out when the goal is to bring more people in. And so I think we really have to look at this with a fresh sort of creative lens. I actually think there's a role, a very large role for Congress to play, because they can step back away from the individual regulatory agencies and see the big picture, because the reality is that this technology is going to continue to be developed. The question is it going to be developed here in the United States, where we can be a leader and we can shape it, in the way that we want it to be, or is it going to go overseas and we're going to miss out on really what we in the industry believe is going to be just foundational technology for so many different things: financial services, the internet, art, social interaction. I mean, this is such a foundational technology that we really, really want to make sure we foster its growth here in the United States, so that the people who live here can participate and benefit from these services.
And so when it comes to how crypto might impact our access to financial services, obviously that seems to be the industry that is at the forefront of this right now. Danelle, can you talk to us about how you see that evolving over time?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I love what Kristen just said about the policy issues, because so much of it is on policy. I think that, we didn't ever necessarily think about it as this global financial market. It was always very fragmented and separate, and each country sort of had control of its own space. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case. It's just when you try to combine it all and you make it all interoperable so that things can happen much more quickly, and you can transfer dollars into euro very quickly. You can transfer pesos into dollars or into naira very quickly, which you can do on blockchain. It makes it so that it's interoperable to the point, not just for individuals, but also for businesses. So it really creates the globalness that we've sort of talked about before in terms of existing, but it didn't exist because it was so fragmented. I think about the early days of the web. And one of the things that I think we're doing differently with the help of folks like Kristen is that, when we were sort of coming into the web technologies and trying to make it all work, we sort of said, hey, policymakers, regulators, we know what we're doing. We don't need your help. We're going to self-regulate. We're going to do our thing. And I think part of this is that what we're doing now is we're engaging all the time with policymakers and regulators to help them to understand the financial services that are offered through these tools that are now available on using blockchain are really beneficial to their communities. And the other part that I think is very different from the early days of the web, and I think we've leveraged a lot of this notion of inclusivity, is that what's useful for blockchain is that it's building from local. So it's not someone here in Silicon Valley, where I happen to live, focusing on what someone in Mexico might need. It's actually folks in Mexico that are building these technologies and these tools to solve the local challenges that they see right in their community. And I think that that's a really big distinction. We have an example on our network that I love to think about. There's two regulated money transfer emitters. Finclusive is the US entity and PagoBicos is the Mexican entity. And they offer a way for day laborers who work in the US and then return home to Mexico each night to securely transfer their value across the border. So they can put their money, their US dollars, they can put it into digital assets, and then they can go across the border without challenges. They could then use this in ways to pay their bills or to do all the stuff that they can in Mexico. But that's a really important use case that I'm not sure that someone who didn't have to experience it would feel. And so I love the fact that focusing on local needs, local problems, and local solutions. And that's what, like, networks that are open like Stellar allow people to be able to develop too. So I think that these financial tools that a lot of minorities and women have been excluded from historically, they get access to now because they can use it on their mobile device, even low-end mobile devices. And they don't need necessarily to always have a certain minimum balance, and they don't have the fees that are very costly that they were experiencing in the traditional financial system. So this interoperability is important. We're not trying to supplant the existing financial system. We're trying to enhance them and make them interoperable so that the many can engage with it.
So with all of these exciting use cases, as we sort of engage with decision makers, how do we do that in a way that allows cryptocurrencies to become more accessible to underrepresented communities? And how do we bolster education in this space, Navrup?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a few tools there. I know Kristen and Blockchain Association, they're engaging directly with policymakers. What we do within the Digital Economist is run a center of excellence on human-centered digital economy. And one of the working groups is on policy. So we write policy briefs focused on tangible steps that policymakers and different stakeholders should take in order to not just benefit from this technology for themselves, for example, delivery of public goods, but also support the ecosystem and play the supporting the innovator role rather than a bottleneck. And of course, is over and beyond direct engagement. Many groups who are influencing policymakers, educating them. The Chamber of Digital Commerce comes to mind, for example, and there are a bunch of groups in the EU that are talking to the European Commission. But what, again, I do think is also important is the voice of the industry and sort of collecting that. Industry standards are an important piece of it, and having sort of that joint voice, again, where trade unions, associations come in and play a critical part. It's a bit of a sad reality, but if you have one or two bad actors, it kind of tarnishes the reputation of the industry overall. And then, regulators take that and kind of make an example out of it as well. And when it comes to the speed and the pace, and everybody's like, oh my god, that happened, and we've seen that happen over the past decade, and that has played out. So again, there are different tools, whether engaging directly or keeping in mind the policy considerations and being proactive about that beforehand, before regulators come in and enforce disciplinary actions. That, I think, has been setbacks to the industry, and just that sophistication's necessary. So that's a business side. But again, what I think is a missing piece, or is even more critical, is leadership and integrity, right? In leadership, and that's kind of where we need to have folks leading organizations that are coming from a place of integrity and the service leadership, which is kind of important not just in the public sector but the world at large. Things have changed a lot since the pandemic, since last year, with the social crisis, with the economic crisis, with the awareness around the world. So again, I'm optimistic that we will continue to sort of move towards a better future. I think, again, leadership and engagement of women is perhaps the easiest, the fastest way to achieve that. We've found a whole bunch of those results from our work at MIT, that if you want to have the highest IQ of a team, the fastest way and easiest way to achieve it is to have at least 50% women. So I'll leave you with some of those comments, Jonathan, and apologies for the noise in the background. Timing's everything, they say in life. This is no exception, and I'm sure other panelists have more to add there.
Thank you, Navrup. And yeah, so as these conversations happen, we've seen the pandemic accelerate so much of the evolution here. But Kristen, what do you see shifting within the industry, and what sort of opportunities and new frontiers excite you for the future?
Well, there's been so much happening in the crypto space, and it's all happening very quickly. And I think that one of the more exciting developments we've seen in the industry is the building of sort of what we call layer one blockchains, but also different applications that really empower creators. So today, the two most common examples are we are seeing artists and we're seeing those that are video gamers build digital goods that you can source to one person, right? Like you can have somebody get paid for something they get or created. You have value to these goods because we can identify who the owner is. You know, previously, before the world of blockchain, you didn't have what we call digital scarcity, right? Anything that you put online, you could replicate and make a million of. But now that we can source who owns the rights to a specific digital good, there's a tremendous amount of innovation that's happening, and we've seen artists that are making a living off of this. The one of the other exciting things are the new areas that are developing. So we're getting to the point where whether it be videos or artists or musical artists, there are new ways for them to monetize the content that they create. Because today, if you're a creator and you're using YouTube or TikTok, you're sort of bound by the terms and service of that particular platform. What we can do with blockchain networks is create new ways where those influencers that are out there that have a following are going to be able to be compensated for that the type of work that they do in ways that they're not today. So I think it's going to be very impactful. And if you think about where we've been over the past 18 months, is most of us, I'm at the office now, but most of us have been stuck at home, and most of our interaction through the world has been through looking at our laptop and looking at our screens. And if you think about that going forward, that's probably going to continue to be in our lives, and there's going to be so much in that space where we are going to want to decorate our digital world the same way we want to decorate and surround ourselves in our homes. And so there's such a tremendous amount of innovation there. It's great for end users, for creators who are trying to make a living. It provides new opportunities. And so this is the type of stuff that really gets me most excited, because it empowers, a lot of the early work in the blockchain space has been accessible to those that have a computer science background and who can get in and play with the code. But there's actually a lot of ways where individuals who don't have that type of scientific background, that are on the creative side, they'll be able to benefit from this as well. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see where this space goes, in the months ahead and years ahead.
It has been very exciting to see sort of the innovation happening around the creative space there. I think now, though, we are moving on to our Q&A. We have, thank you everyone for sending over questions, and please continue to do so. But I'm just going to go ahead and start taking some of these. So without regulation, how can we make sure that cryptocurrency is more legitimate and limit the amount of scam coins being traded in our communities? I think we've seen some examples of like initial coin offerings raising millions and then, crashing later. But I think, let's see, Navrup, do you want to tackle this one?
Sure. I was going to say the exchange boys also ran away with a few $100 million on that over and beyond the ICOs. Again, I think we've touched upon that topic previously, just in this discussion. Industry standards are big, leadership is key. Right. And I think education is, again, the biggest component. We wrote this piece on in what became the first book on blockchain economics on here's this criteria. Here is your checklist. Run through that checklist when you are making investment decisions, however small, when it comes to investing in crypto or blockchain based, assets or, digital assets at large. And Kristen, you talked about NFTs. And, doing sort of that due diligence yourself is important. And I think investing is, again, something that the world is waking up to, is not just the domain of the few and the far between here and there. Because, again, in the digital realm, remember, there's no limits to the resources, right? We did this piece in Forbes, in fact, last year, which talked about going from the physical scarcity, because the resources of the planet are finite, to digital abundance, and having a way, and this framework doesn't exist, having a way to separate the two, where humans, animal spirits can run as wild as they want to in the digital world, but it shouldn't affect the physical scarcity of the finite resources that we live in. And I would invite anyone in the audience or anyone here who's interested in that work to come talk to me, and building that, right? And so kind of taking a segue here from this question, Jonathan, but I mean that's the kind of thing that's missing right now in this space. As we build more and more in the digital realm, how do we ensure that the trading in New York is not stifling the livelihoods of farmers in Africa or in India? And the world is interconnected, and futures trading does make differences to what happens, right, and the way capital moves. So all of that is important when it comes to scam, but I think education is the big piece, and self-education, commitment to learning, quite honestly, not just, okay, how can I quickly make some money, which continues to be the attitude, which for those of us who've been in the space for very long is the hardest thing perhaps to tackle with, right? So I'll leave it there.
With the due diligence, this happens, and then what is the best way? Once someone who is eager to jump in the space, a small business, what's the best way that they can use cryptocurrencies, and how can they sort of use cryptocurrencies to maximize their own income and business operations? Danelle, do you want to do this one?
Sure. I think most importantly, I hate it when, and this is the same for any technology, but it shouldn't be you shouldn't be in search of a problem to use this technology. You should really think about the use cases and how the use cases, how you can use this technology to solve your use cases. So I think that that's a really, really important piece of this. And I think that's also how we are going to get more education out there, is focusing on what is blockchain and what are cryptocurrencies really, really good for. And so I really would want everybody to be focused on that piece of it, and to say, today at scale, what's important? Well, there could be lending needs that you could actually leverage working capital loans using cryptocurrencies. You could actually leverage the notion of being able to make payments in a much more simplified and universal way to all parts of the geography. And that could be a really important part for your business. So I think it's actually, what are the hiccups that you're experiencing within your business? And then really, really focus on what part of the technologies and the tools that are out there can actually help you to solve those problems. Because I think that there are a lot of them. But that is also going to help you to not get caught up in the hype, because there is a lot of hype out there. I'm not saying some of it isn't really good for the industry. I just think that there is a lot of it. And so what we also need to focus on is, what is the value that is created here? And that's the place that I try to go to every time that we're talking to regulators and policymakers, for example, or we're talking to folks who want to build in blockchain. You have to figure out, what is the problem you're solving, and how can I help you solve it with this technology? Because if we don't, one of the other points that you just were talking about in terms of, I guess, the question about regulation, you don't need to regulate all parts of this industry, because there are regulations that already apply to lots of parts of the industry. What's really important is governments know how to regulate money, because they've been doing it for a heck of a long time. And so when you think about it from that standpoint, what I think we need to do is really look at the industry holistically, look at the parts of the industry that are already regulated, and then figure out where there's holes, instead of approaching it from that holistic stance. And that is how I think you can actually then figure out what value we're achieving through this, which I love to focus on the value creation opportunities and how that can help the small businesses or the large businesses solve some of the problems that they're encountering for their end users, business or consumer.
Thank you. And our next question here is for young Latinos who are interested in getting involved in the cryptocurrency industry. What are some of the career opportunities there? Kristen?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that. We have, I believe it's over 3,000 jobs posted on a jobs board on the Blockchain Association website. And those 3,000 jobs are coming from our 50 member companies. So there are so many opportunities right now. And, not many people have been doing the blockchain cryptocurrency space for a long time. And so the beauty of these positions is they're very open to people with different types of backgrounds. And, when they're looking for somebody in the communications field, they don't necessarily have to have been in crypto communications because there's no talent pool to choose from. So it's a great sector to take whatever you're doing now and pivot it towards a crypto or blockchain focus. And at the Blockchain Association, we have a diversity and inclusion working group that is working to take this jobs board and work with universities, around the country to make sure that that there's a diversity in terms of the pipeline of people that are applying for those jobs. And so the other thing I would say about the crypto space is even before the pandemic, a lot of these companies were distributed or decentralized. Like their workforces are all over the place. And if they weren't before, now that the pandemic is over, most of them, you can be anywhere in the world and do these positions. And so it's a really great space that's very open. People work really hard, though. I'll tell you that if you want to get into this space, this is not for somebody who's looking for a part-time job. These are it's a really hard working group of people because things are happening so quickly. There's so much information to keep up on. You really have to be excited about it. So, I would recommend you can visit the blockchainassociation.org and navigate to our jobs board. But you really want to spend a little time learning and thinking about this. It's very easy when somebody shows up to differentiate between those who have sort of caught the bug and are very passionate about it, and those are just who are sort of casually curious. So for anyone looking to transition into the space, you do want to do your homework and spend some time doing it. And I warn you that once you do that, you're not going to want to work in being a dynamic industry to be in.
So we have one more minute here. If you could sum it up, I guess the biggest opportunity in the next 5 years, Danelle, how would you sum that up in a sentence or so?
I think that I look at this as really thinking about the world from a global standpoint in a way that we've never really done historically, as I said. Like, I think that this whole fragmented infrastructure that exists, there's this opportunity, and it's already happening today, which is what I love, for it to be interoperable, for it to be seamless, for us to remove some of these roadblocks. And so I think if we really, really focus on this and try very hard not to sort of, think about things just in our own box, we can actually create that world and bring all of these financial tools to everyone. And that is truly the inclusive, the notion of inclusivity that I think those of us who are in blockchain to like create this equitable access to the global financial system, that's what we want to see. And we have the opportunity, we have the tools, we just need to make sure that we don't shut it down by being, proprietary or by thinking that interoperability isn't the way to go. So I really passionately want us to be thinking from that standpoint.
So almost at the end here, but I want to take a minute for each of our panelists to just share the final thought that they want to leave the audience with. I think we'll have about a minute each, but Navrup, do you want to kick us off?
Sure thing. Yeah, no, what a fantastic panel. And I think we've covered a lot of ground, everything from direct career advice to general commentary on the space to where the opportunity is. My biggest takeaway here is to say, get engaged now, right? Before, again, to, the previous sort of heads up here, it becomes a space where, few and few companies and few people become very influential. As an economist, I can say that markets tend to centralize because their efficiency gains. And I think the original intent of, as a reaction to the world that has become very centralized and very unequal. By the way, inequality levels are pre-World War One levels. So, there's a big question mark on the American dream. And just, Danelle, to your point, I can't resonate enough here, which is the global collaboration. Right. I mean, I actually think it would be good if there is leadership from other countries. Because it will sort of level the playing field a little bit. When I was studying in India as a student, there was always this notion of the core and the periphery when it comes to the World Economic Order. 5, 6 years later, I ended up developing a series of work on the new World Economic Order, which shouldn't have this periphery always contributing to the core. Right? Again, this is a colonial artifact where countries are colonizing others, or just go and extract as much as possible to benefit themselves. A prime example being UK, historically speaking, and not personally. And so I think that new world economic order has to emerge, and the way it would emerge, and the best way it would emerge, is for us to not just take care and look out and be conscious stewards of this space, but also worldwide. We make a lot of conscious effort to ensure that people from Africa, Latin America. Okay, I'll pause here.
No, you're good. Kristen, your final thought here?
Yeah, no, I'll be quick. I think the biggest thing to take away is that the crypto ecosystem is a permissionless ecosystem. It means that anybody can participate in it, and they can build on it. They can use the technology. You don't have to go through an institution or through a government, or even through a giant sort of platform to access this world. And yes, it's a complicated world, but in a place where there's so much information available, to be able to go in and look under the hood and see how these networks run is really a great thing. And we need lots of people who can understand it. And so I think that this is going to be incredibly empowering. I think it's going to lift people up the ladder in a way that we haven't seen, at least in sort of my adult lifetime with the financial crisis that I lived through. I've just seen people be pulled down. I've seen people be pulled down by student debt, by a stagnant economy. I think this is what is going to lift people up and bring the quality of life up for people all around the world, and I get really excited about that.
Thank you, Kristen. And Danelle, your final thought.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be part of this panel and just to be part of this discussion, and the opportunity to shed light on how blockchain technology is improving financial inclusion for Latinx communities and users all over the world. It's super cool that we're able to talk about this. It's awesome that we're going to think about how we can talk to policymakers and regulators to make this all available and open for everyone. As we've discussed today, we need to continue to reach and engage Latinx populations with these services and information. So we're committed to doing that, but we can't make it happen alone. And so I hope you'll all continue to engage and work with us to make this all happen. There's incredible real world opportunity here. And it's local companies and developers solving local needs. And this is how it should be. And their solutions continue to grow and to scale. So take a look at it, reach out if you need any information. So grateful for the time to be able to spend here.
And with that, I want to say thank you to each of you. I really wish we had more time, but thank you, Navrup, Kristen, and Danelle. I think this has been a great conversation, and I'm really excited for everyone here just taking these thoughts with them and really applying them, because I think that's important. But for everyone else, just please keep tweeting about the conference. Again, the hashtag is CHCIHHM21. We have a full slate of sessions here scheduled throughout the week, including several more plenaries and panel discussions. I truly encourage you to attend sessions throughout the day. There will be some more after this, and do not forget to come to the plenary tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. If you know people who might be interested in the conference but haven't signed up yet, encourage them to register by visiting chci.org. And lastly, please join our virtual 44th Annual Awards Gala celebration tomorrow evening. That's September 23rd from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Once you register for the conference, you'll already be registered for the gala, so there's nothing more to do other than log back in. With that, I will see you there, and thank you all again. This has been great.